My name is Natalie Pierce, and I'm 29 years old. Last Christmas Eve, my stepfather stood up at the head of his own dinner table, in front of 22 relatives, pointed his fork at me like a gavel, and told me I had no right to ask what my grandfather left behind, and that I should learn to be grateful for whatever scraps the family decided to give me. The room went quiet, the kind of quiet that has a hum in it, and then somebody laughed. I think it was his sister. And the laugh spread the way laughter does when people are relieved it isn't aimed at them. My ears went hot, my hands went cold. I looked at him across the table and said, "Understood." Then I folded my napkin, set it beside my plate, and went upstairs to the guest room I'd been assigned. Because apparently I didn't rate my old bedroom anymore. The next morning, he knocked on that door with 3 sharp raps, the kind that already assumes obedience. "Natalie," he said, "time to come down and apologize to your brother." There was no answer, because there was no one in the room. The bed was made. The closet was empty. The only thing left behind was my grandfather's reading glasses, folded neatly on the nightstand, lenses down, like something laid to rest. By the time my stepfather made it back downstairs, the doorbell was already ringing, and the man standing on the porch in a gray overcoat, holding a leather portfolio against the December cold, was about to take apart everything. My stepfather thought he'd already won, but before I tell you who that man was, I want to ask you something, because I think a lot of you already know the answer in your gut. Has anyone in your own family ever made you feel like you were a guest in a house you helped build? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I read every single one, I promise you that. Let me take you back to where this actually started, to a Tuesday morning in late October, when my grandfather died, and the first piece fell. His name was Walter Pierce. He was 86, and he passed in his sleep at Sutter Health in Sacramento, just after 5 in the morning. The nurse told us, peaceful, no struggle. I got the call from my mother while I was standing in my kitchen in Midtown Sacramento, coffee going cold on the counter, a half-finished freelance graphic design mock-up glowing on my laptop screen for a brewery's new can labels. My mother's voice cracked on the second word. "It's Dad, Nat. He's gone." I didn't even change out of my sweatpants. I just grabbed my keys and drove. When I got to the hospital, my stepfather, Roger Whitfield, was already in the hallway outside the room, 63 years old, 6'2", wearing a quarter-zip sweater that looked pressed even at 5 in the morning. He wasn't crying. He was on the phone, voice low, using words like estate and Enster, like he was already rehearsing a closing argument. He hung up when he saw me and didn't say hello. My stepbrother Cole was next to him, 36, a sales director for a medical device company, wearing his blazer like it was a uniform he never took off. He had his hand on Roger's shoulder, the way you pose for a photo you already know is going in a frame somewhere. I stood at the far end of the corridor, holding a paper cup of vending machine coffee I never drank. The last time I'd seen my grandfather alone, really alone, was 3 weeks earlier, in his recliner in the den of his house, out in Carmichael, his oxygen tank humming next to him. He'd grabbed my hand with more strength than I expected and said, low, the way he talked when he didn't want anyone else in the house to hear, "Natalie, I've handled it. You've trust your grandfather, don't you?" I'd nodded. I didn't understand what he meant. Not then. The funeral was at a small Lutheran church off Fair Oaks Boulevard, white lilies, an oak casket, that thin gray October light coming sideways through the windows. Roger gave the eulogy. He spoke for almost 15 minutes about legacy, about responsibility, about how Walter Pierce's example would live on through this family's next generation, and by that he meant Cole. He said Cole's name 5 times. He said my mother's name twice. He did not say my name once. I sat in the second pew and counted the omissions like a kid counting ceiling tiles to keep from crying in church. Afterward, in the receiving line, a woman I didn't recognize found me near the side door. Maybe 60, silver bob, navy blazer, small pearl earrings. She took my hand, firm, and held it a beat too long to be casual. "Your grandfather spoke about you constantly," she said quietly, almost like she was passing me something. "I'll be in touch, Natalie." She was gone into the parking lot before I could even ask her name. I didn't know it then. But that woman was Diane Reyes, and she was carrying the one thing my stepfather hadn't planned for. That evening, about 14 of us gathered at my grandfather's house in Carmichael, the one-story ranch he'd bought in 1979. With money he'd saved to working 26 years for the county, with a long covered patio out back and a lemon tree he babied like it owed him money. Roger sat at the head of the kitchen table like he'd already redecorated the place in his head. He raised his glass of bourbon. "Dad left things in a bit of a mess," he said, looking around the table like he was taking attendance. "But I'm going to make sure everything is distributed where it'll actually do some good, where people are ready for it." His eyes landed on me and stayed there a half-second too long. "That means you don't need to worry about any of this, Natalie. You're still figuring some things out. We all understand that." Cole nodded along, his wife Priya straightening a napkin like it needed her full attention. I set my fork down on the edge of my plate, slow, deliberate. Grandpa told me, I started. Your grandfather was confused near the end, Roger said, cutting me off clean like he'd practiced it. Whatever he said to you, it won't hold up. Let it go, Natalie. My mother, Carol, stared at her wine glass. She didn't look up. She never looked up, not once that whole night. After dinner, I went down the hall to the bedroom that used to be the guest room when I was a kid. Back when I used to sleep over on weekends so my mom could work doubles. There was a quilt on the bed my grandmother had made before she passed. And out of pure muscle memory, I opened the drawer of the little side table. There was an envelope inside that hadn't been there before. Heavy cream paper, my name on the front in my grandfather's handwriting, the letters a little shaky but pressed hard into the page, like he wanted to make sure they'd survive. Inside was a letter and a partial photocopy of something headed, Irrevocable Trust Agreement, Walter J. Pierce, Settler. Halfway down the first page, highlighted in yellow marker, the word beneficiary, and beneath it, my full name. My hands actually shook reading it. Natalie, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and Roger is already doing exactly what I always knew he'd do. I'm sorry I couldn't stop him while I was still standing. Men like Roger only believe in paper, so I made sure there's paper. The original is with my attorney, Diane Reyes. Her office is on J Street downtown. What I'm leaving you here is only a partial copy, not enough on its own, but enough for you to know I wasn't lying to you. Don't show this to anyone, Natalie. Not Roger, not Cole, not even your mother yet. Wait for the right moment. Diane will know exactly what to do when you're ready. You were always the one who actually came and sat with me. You were always worth more than that man ever let you believe. I love you, Grandpa. I sat on the edge of that bed, in the dark, for a long time. The letter pressed flat against my chest, like I was trying to keep it from blowing away. 3 weeks after that, I got an email that wasn't meant for me. Cole had forwarded a chain to the wrong contact. An old work address of mine that was still saved somewhere in his phone. From years back when I'd done some freelance design for his company's trade show booth. The subject line read, Re-petition, Trust Beneficiary Change. I opened it, 6 messages, back and forth between Cole and Roger, casual, efficient, like they were planning a fishing trip. Cole had drafted a petition to file with the probate court, requesting a change of beneficiary on the grounds of financial instabilities, and demonstrated poor judgment on the part of the named heir. He'd cited my freelance income, my apartment lease instead of a mortgage, my lack of asset history, as evidence I wasn't fit to manage a significant inheritance. But the line that actually made the room tilt sideways for me was at the bottom of the thread, typed casual as a grocery list. She's not going to fight it, Dad. She never does. That's exactly why this works. I screenshotted every message, backed it up to 2 different drives. Then I sat on my kitchen floor for a long time before I called my mother and told her I'd be coming for Christmas Eve after all. I wasn't going back to make peace. I was going back to finish something. The next morning I called Diane Reyes's office. The receptionist put me on hold for maybe 10 seconds. Ems? Pierce, she said when she came back. Ms. Reyes has been expecting your call. 2 days later I was sitting across from her on the 9th floor of an office building downtown. The Sacramento skyline gray and flat behind her through the window. Diane Reyes was exactly what I remembered from the funeral, composed, unhurried, the kind of person who has heard every version of family betrayal there is, and stopped being surprised by any of them. Your grandfather hired me 8 years ago, she said. About 5 years ago he came back in and asked me to set up an irrevocable trust naming you as sole beneficiary. He told me, and I'm quoting him exactly, Roger will try to undo this, make absolutely sure he can't. She slid the original document across the desk toward me. $410,000, held in trust through a regional bank, notary seal in the corner. My grandfather's signature in blue ink, steady, deliberate, nothing shaky about it at all. Irrevocable means the trustee, your stepfather, cannot change the named beneficiary without your written consent, or a court finding of incapacity at the time of signing. Diane said. Your grandfather had his physician run a full cognitive evaluation the same week he signed. He scored in the top tier for his age bracket. That report is on file with this office. I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath since October. There's more, she said, opening a second folder. Roger filed a petition with the probate court 3 weeks ago. He told the court he'd been unable to locate the trust's beneficiary. She looked at me, steady. You live 40 minutes from that courthouse. You were at his house for Thanksgiving. He has your phone number, saved under Natalie in his own contacts, I'd imagine. I showed her the email chain on my phone. She read it without a single change of expression, then looked up. This is evidence of a fraudulent statement to a probate court, she said. And a likely breach of fiduciary duty, given his role as named trustee on the original estate documents. If you want to pursue this, you have more than enough to do it properly. I want to pursue it, I said. She nodded once, then almost gently added, There's one more thing. Your grandfather also left you the cabin. I went very still. The little A-frame up near Pollock Pines. The one he and my grandmother bought in the 70s, where I used to spend 2 weeks every summer. fishing off the dock with him at 6 in the morning, where he used to tell me I had a stubborn streak nobody in this family had bothered to put to good use yet. Diane watched my face change. He spent years making sure you'd be protected, Natalie, she said. The only real question left is when you want to use it. Christmas Eve, I said. He's having the whole family over. She studied me for a moment, then gave one slow nod, the kind that means yes and also means be ready. The Tuesday before Christmas, I drove out to Carmichael in my Subaru with one duffel bag, my grandmother's old wool coat from the hall closet, and a manila folder thick with notarized copies. The originals stayed locked in Diane's office. The house came into view through the bare branches, the way it always did this time of year, single story, brick chimney, that stubborn lemon tree, still hanging on to a few fruits, even in the cold. From the street, it looked like the same solid, ordinary family home it had always been. My mother met me at the door and hugged me 3 seconds too long, the kind of hug that's apologizing for something it can't say out loud. That night, Roger barely looked at me. Cole made a comment about my Subaru needing new tires. Priya gave me her practiced little half-smile. I smiled back and said nothing. I went down the hall, slid the manila folder under the mattress of the guest bed, and stood at the window looking out at the patio, the string lights from some Christmas years ago still hanging crooked along the eaves. Nobody had bothered to take them down since Grandpa got too sick to climb a ladder. I put my palm flat against the cold glass. I'm here, Grandpa. Christmas Eve morning, the house filled up like a small theater before curtain. By noon, 22 relatives had packed into every room, folding chairs dragged in from the garage, the dining table extended with 2 card tables pushed up against the end. Roger moved through the whole thing like a man hosting his own coronation. I ended up at the overflow table, between my 11-year-old cousin Harper and an empty folding chair nobody claimed. I helped carry dishes out of the kitchen. I hadn't been asked to help cook, because that was just how it had always worked in this family, and I'd stopped questioning it years ago. At 4 o'clock, Roger stood at the head of the main table, the dining room chandelier throwing a warm light over everyone, and raised his glass. Tonight we remember Dad, he said, and we celebrate the man who's going to carry this family forward, my son, Cole, who just made regional director. Applause around the table. Cole accepted it with a small, practiced nod, like he was used to applause and slightly bored by it. From the folding table, my Aunt Denise called out, "What about Natalie? Anything new going on with you, honey?" I opened my mouth to answer. "Natalie's still finding her footing," Roger said, not even glancing my way. "She does the graphic design thing. It's nice. We're proud of her, in our own way." A small laugh moved around the room, warm and easy and entirely at my expense. "Every family needs someone to make the pretty invitations, right, Nat?" More laughter. Harper looked up at me with big, worried eyes. "Are you okay?" she whispered. I handed her a roll and nodded, because what else do you do at 11 years old except notice everything and say nothing? Later, after the pie was half gone, and the bourbon had been flowing for an hour, Roger stood again, and the room actually quieted on its own this time. "Tomorrow morning," he said, "I'll be sharing Dad's final wishes about the estate. I want everyone here for it." He looked straight at me when he said it, and his smile had an edge to it. I recognized from a lifetime of watching him win arguments he'd already decided the outcome of. That night I did the dishes alone. Cole came and leaned in the kitchen doorway, wine glass dangling from 2 fingers like a prop. "You know, Nat," he said, "you should really just let Dad handle the estate stuff. It's complicated, probate, trusts, all of it. Not really your wheelhouse." I kept scrubbing the same roasting pan, not looking up. Something in me that had been clenched for 29 years finally went still in a way that felt less like giving up and more like deciding. "Cole," I said quietly, "do you know what Grandpa actually left me?" The silence behind me changed texture completely. I looked over my shoulder. His face had gone very flat, very fast. He left the kitchen without answering. 10 minutes later, Roger's voice boomed out from the living room. "Natalie, get in here." I dried my hands slowly, on purpose, and walked in. 22 faces turned toward me at once. Roger stood in the middle of the room, pointing at me like I was on trial. "What exactly did you say to your brother?" His courtroom voice, the one built for closing arguments at HOA meetings and church board votes. "Are you threatening this family over a will you don't even understand?" I started to answer. "Go to your room," he said. Loud enough that conversation in the kitchen stopped. "You're grounded until you apologize to Cole." 22 grown adults, and the room laughed. Not all of them, but enough. My Aunt Denise put a hand over her mouth, shoulders shaking. Uncle Frank let out a short bark of a laugh into his drink. Priya did that little delicate gasp that was really just a giggle dressed up nicer. My mother sat in the corner armchair, staring at her hands, not looking up, not once. I held Roger's stare for 3 full seconds. Then I said, in a voice so even it actually surprised me, "Understood." I turned and walked down the hall. I closed the bedroom door behind me, sat on the edge of the bed and picked up my phone. Diane Reyes answered on the second ring. "Ms. Reyes," I said, Can you be there at 9 tomorrow morning, with the originals? A short pause on the line. I'll be there at 8:30, she said. I set my alarm for 4 a.m. and sat in the dark, listening to the laughter still drifting down the hallway through the heating vents. Enjoy it, I thought. This is the last night you get to laugh like that. I left at 4:20 in the morning. No drama. Just my bag, my folder, and my socks on the stairs, so the old wood wouldn't creak under me. I left my grandfather's reading glasses face down on the nightstand, the only punctuation I needed. I drove to a 24-hour diner off Sunrise Boulevard, ordered black coffee I nursed for 3 hours, and watched the sky go from black to gray to that pale Sacramento winter blue. At 7:40, Cole texted me, "Where are you? Dad's looking for you." I didn't answer. Inside the house, I heard this later from my cousin Marcus. Roger came downstairs around 7:30, pressed shirt, poured his coffee like it was any other morning, and said, "Someone go get Natalie." Nobody moved right away, so he went himself. He knocked twice, sharp, expecting the door to open on his terms. It didn't. He opened it himself, empty. Bed made. Closet bare, my grandfather's glasses face down. He stood in that doorway, Marcus told me, for like 10 full seconds, just staring at the bed. Then he came back downstairs, voice flat. Natalie left. Ran off like a coward, apparently. Cole gave a little smile. "Well," he said, "that settles that." "It does," Roger said. "I'll go ahead and make the announcement now since..." The doorbell rang. My mother opened the door. Diane Reyes stood on the porch in a navy wool coat, leather portfolio under one arm, an expression like weather rolling in before a storm. "My name is Diane Reyes," she said. "I'm the attorney of record for the estate of Walter Pierce. I need to speak with this family right now." What happened over the next 40 minutes is something nobody at that table has fully recovered from, even now. Diane walked into that living room the way I imagine she walks into every room, unhurried, certain, carrying 20 years of other people's worst secrets and knowing exactly where to set each one down. Roger rose to his full height. "Diane, you weren't invited here. This is the Pierce family home," she said, "built with Walter Pierce's money. And I'm here because I have a fiduciary obligation to the sole named beneficiary of his irrevocable trust. Natalie is that beneficiary, established 7 years ago. You've known this, Mr. Whitfield, since the day he signed it." The room went completely still. Roger's jaw tightened. "My father-in-law was in decline," he said. "His physician evaluated him the same week. He scored in the top tier for his age group, cognitively," Diane said. "That report is on file, and I have a copy here if anyone would like to see it." She opened her portfolio and laid the original trust document on the coffee table. Cream paper, blue ink signature, steady as a heartbeat. "Would anyone like me to read it aloud?" Aunt Denise leaned forward. Uncle Frank set his coffee down. Roger looked at that document the way you look at something you suddenly realize is loaded. "Get out of my house," he said quietly. Diane didn't move an inch. "You filed a petition with the probate court 3 weeks ago," she said, "stating you were unable to locate the trust's beneficiary. The same beneficiary who slept down this hallway last night." She pulled out a printed copy of the email chain and read one line aloud, flat and clear. "She's not going to fight it, Dad. She never does." That's exactly why this works. The whole room turned toward Cole in silence. Diane laid it all out methodically. The petition, the timestamps, the emails, Cole's bar registration number printed at the bottom of the page, like a signature he hadn't thought twice about leaving there. Cole opened his mouth twice and produced nothing both times. Roger demanded he say something, anything. But Cole just sat there, and eventually admitted, quiet and flat, that the trust couldn't actually be touched, that they'd known that for months, that they'd simply hoped I'd never find out. Aunt Denise and another aunt, Pat, admitted quietly that Grandpa had told them, more than once, that this exact thing would happen. Roger, defeated in front of everyone he'd spent the morning performing for, walked into the den and shut the door, and didn't come back out for the rest of the day. The following week, Diane formally petitioned to have Roger removed as trustee, and filed a complaint with the state bar regarding Cole's conduct. Faced with documentation he couldn't argue with in any courtroom, Roger stopped fighting it. The trust and the cabin transferred to me cleanly within 2 months. I paid off the rest of my car loan and put a real down payment on a condo for the first time in my life. Cole lost 2 of his biggest accounts once word got around in his small industry circle, and the bar suspended his license for 8 months pending review. Roger told anyone who'd listen that I'd torn this family apart over money. We haven't spoken since. A week after everything settled, I drove up to the cabin near Pollock Pines by myself. Inside, in an old cedar chest, I found photographs of me as a kid, fishing off that same dock, and a second letter, shorter than the first, telling me he'd believed in me since I was small enough to sit on his shoulders, long before anyone else in that family had bothered to look twice. I cried up there for the first time since October, and it wasn't grief this time. It was relief, finally landing somewhere safe. That Sunday I sent one email to the whole family, short, calm, no anger in it at all. I told them I loved them, and that going forward I'd only have a relationship with people who treated me with basic respect. Full stop. no exceptions made for blood. My mother wrote back within the hour, just one line. I'm sorry I never stood beside you when it mattered. Cole replied 2 days later saying he understood why I'd done what I did. Roger never replied at all. 6 months on, my car loan is gone. My condo has actual furniture in it now instead of folding chairs, and I started taking on bigger design clients than I ever let myself believe I could land. My mother and I talk most weeks now, slowly finding our way back to something real. Roger still tells people at church that I ruined this family over an inheritance. Sitting on the dock at the cabin one evening this spring, watching the light go gold over the water the way it used to when I was a kid, I finally understood what my grandfather's real gift to me actually was. It was never the money, and it was never the cabin. It was proof, in his own handwriting, that I had always been worth fighting for, even when nobody else in that house thought to say it out loud. I keep that proof folded inside my grandmother's old Bible now, right next to his letter, and every time I walk back into that condo after a long week, it finally feels like coming home.